All right, finals are just around the corner, and you've got to get these core concepts of business law down cold. Well, you're in exactly the right place. We're about to do a high-intensity cram session on two of the heaviest hitters you're going to face. First, what actually makes a contract legally binding, and second, how the law protects a brand's most valuable asset, its identity. Let's get right into it.
So what really is the difference? I mean, this is the question that trips up so many people. If you promise a friend you'll help them move, is that the same, legally speaking, as signing a contract to buy a car? Nope. And the law has a very precise answer why. It all comes down to a few key ingredients that turn a casual, everyday promise into something a court can actually enforce.
Here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basics of what makes a promise stick. Then, we'll dive deep into the heart of it all, consideration. After that, we're shifting gears completely to protecting your big ideas with a laser focus on trademarks and the laws that guard them.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the actual architecture of a contract. You can think of it like building a house, right? Before a court is going to recognize it and say, yep, that's a solid structure, it needs a really strong legal foundation.
Now, our main event today is a concept called consideration, but it's absolutely crucial to remember that it doesn't work alone. For any contract to be valid, you also need legality. You can't have an enforceable contract to do something illegal, and you need capacity. And Bart Simpson here is the perfect example of capacity. As a minor, Bart generally lacks the legal ability or capacity to enter into a binding contract. So here's a huge exam tip for you. If a test question involves a minor, your brain should immediately scream capacity issue. Even if every other piece of the contract looks perfect, the deal could be voidable. That's a point you don't want to forget.
And that brings us to the main event. We're zooming in now on what is, I'd argue, the most tested, most critical element of forming a contract: consideration. This is the secret sauce, the magic ingredient that separates a simple promise to give a gift from a real binding deal.
So here's the textbook definition. And yeah, you should probably have this memorized. But what does it really mean? Simply put, consideration is the value that both parties exchange. It's the this for that. It's the price of the promise. Without this mutual give and get, you don't actually have a contract. What you have is a promise to give a gift. And generally, you can't sue someone for not giving you a gift they promised.
This slide right here, this is pure gold for your exam. Always, always, always break consideration down into this simple two-part test, because that's exactly what the courts do. Part 1, was something of legally sufficient value exchanged? And Part 2, was that value specifically bargained for by both sides? You have to have both. One without the other is a no-go. So let's talk about that first part, legally sufficient value. Now here's a huge misconception. This doesn't mean the deal has to be fair. Courts almost never look at whether you got a good deal. It just means that something of value in the eyes of the law has to be given. That could be money, sure, but it could also be a promise to do something, actually performing an action, or even promising not to do something you have a legal right to do, like agreeing not to sue somebody in exchange for a cash settlement. That forbearance is a form of value.
Okay, pay attention because this is a big one. Professors absolutely love to write exam questions with scenarios where it looks like there's consideration, but legally there's nothing there. Recognizing these traps, these agreements that are basically hollow on the inside, is how you're going to ace those multiple choice questions.
And here it is, the #1 exam trap, past consideration. The rule is simple, it's absolute, and you need to burn it into your brain. Past consideration is no consideration. Period. Let me give you an example. Your boss comes to you and says, hey, you did such an amazing job last quarter, I'm going to give you a $5,000 bonus. That promise is legally unenforceable. Why? Because the work is already done, it's in the past. The bargain for exchange element is missing. The promise of a bonus didn't cause you to do the great work. For consideration to be valid, the bargain has to happen either before or at the exact same time as the promise.
All right, let's switch gears. We just covered how contract law protects your promises and agreements. But what about another hugely valuable business asset? Your ideas, your brand, your creative work. Well, that's a whole different ballgame. That's where intellectual property law comes in.
Intellectual property, or IP, is this massive umbrella term. It covers a ton of stuff. The logo on your phone, that's a trademark. The crazy cool technology that makes it work, that's protected by patents. The software code running your apps, that's copyright. And that secret recipe for Coca-Cola, that's a classic trade secret. We're about to put one of these under a microscope.
Okay, let's really focus in on trademarks. At their core, trademarks are source identifiers. They tell you where a product or service comes from. And a key concept here is that not all marks are created equal.
The strongest ones are what we call fanciful, like Kodak, a made-up word, or arbitrary, like Apple for computers. They're strong because the word has nothing to do with the product. The weaker a mark gets, the harder it is to protect. It's all about a spectrum of distinctiveness.
If you only remember one single thing about trademarks for your final, make it this. The entire legal framework, all the rules and tests, are built to answer one single question. Is the consumer likely to be confused about the source of this product? The law just wants to make sure that when you go to buy a Coke, you're actually getting a real Coke from the Coca-Cola company, and not some knockoff that just copied the logo. So this system of protection didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's got a pretty cool history. It actually started with common law, which basically meant if you used a mark in your town, you got some rights there. Then, the U.S. Constitution itself gave Congress the power to create laws to protect intellectual property. And all of that history led to the big one, the most important law in this space, the Lanham Act of 1946. This is the federal law that created the national trademark registration system we rely on today. Okay, let's level up for a second and talk about a more advanced topic, but one that is absolutely testable. We know trademark law prevents consumer confusion, but it also protects very famous marks from something else, a concept called dilution.
So what in the world does that mean? The key here is that dilution is not about confusion. Think about it. If you saw Rolex skateboards, would you actually think the luxury watch company started making skateboards? Probably not. You're not confused. But using that famous Rolex name on a completely unrelated product weakens the unique selling power of the original brand. It blurs it, it tarnishes it, it waters it down. And the law steps in to protect these famous marks from that kind of harm.
So let's bring it all home and tie a bow on it for your exam. The two big topics we covered protect two fundamentally different but equally vital parts of a business. Contract law, with consideration as its engine, protects the integrity of your deals and agreements. Trademark law, on the other hand, protects the integrity of your brand and the relationship you have with your customers. And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. These legal ideas, consideration, dilution, they were developed over hundreds of years. But what happens now? In a world of AI-generated content, NFTs, and business in the metaverse, what does a bargain for exchange even look like? How do you stop a brand from being diluted in a virtual world? These old foundational laws are being stretched and tested every single day. And understanding their core principles, the stuff we just covered, is the only way to figure out where they're going next.